We are now we are now jumping to our discussion of Purim. And in our last session, we did a discussion about the laws of reading the Megillah and the need to read the Megillah. Tonight's discussion is going to be on the other mitzvot of Purim. I'm anticipating we'll be about 45 minutes on this. I'm certainly leaving time for questions and things like that, but the basic thrust is going to be hopefully about that long, and hopefully we'll cover the major subjects. Now let's just talk about one aspect of Purim itself. When you look at the Megillah, and I'm going to just, if I may, I'm going to pull up the Megillah itself. Give me 1 second to pull up the text. Esther. Okay, we're in the 9th chapter of Esther. Just a little background to this, and I've mentioned this before, but it's just worth putting up there again. The Jews and the Megillah's plot sort of is initiated when Haman pays Achashverosh for the right to destroy all the Jews in all 127 provinces of Achashverosh's kingdom. And the threat looms, and Esther is told she has to approach the king, and she approaches the king, and the king says, Esther, what do you want? And literally this phrase is used. Ma shelatech, what is your question? Ma bakashatech, what is your request? V'naten lach. Ad chatzi amachut. I will give it to you up until half of the kingdom. So she could have requested, I want half the army. Deploy them for me. What does she asks? She asks first to reverse the decree of Haman. King Ahasuerus says, sorry, no can do. Once the king's decree has gone out, it cannot be rescinded. There's no such thing as rescinding a king's decree. So she gains something a little different, and she says that the Jews are allowed to la'amod al nafsham. They can stand by their lives. They can, more or less, it means they can defend themselves. So I would have thought they could do that before she got the special permission. Now, maybe there's certain things that comes, right? Imagine this happening in our day and age, and let's say Jews weren't allowed to buy guns, so it would be really hard for us to defend ourselves. We have to buy the guns on the black market, and then exposed to a lot of dangerous people, and we'd find out, and all sorts of things. So maybe now we can legally buy guns. Back then it wasn't guns, maybe it was swords, maybe it was, spears, whatever the weapons were. But one of the interesting things that happens in the Megillah is it says, Nikalu haYehudim ba'arehem, that the Jews, the translation here is they mustered. But what is the shoresh of the word nikahalu? Anybody know what that shoresh means?
Kahal.
Okay, good. Annie, what kahal? Kahal, what's a kahal?
Well,
Here.
it translates to congregation.
Look, I love this Safaria thing. It tells you exactly what
Assembly.
that word means. It means
gather.
Oh, good. Right. Assembly, right? Congregation, an organized body, right? So what was the magic of this story? The magic of the story is the Jews were able to gather together, right? And you'll see that this word is a word that gets repeated over and over again. Again, so we saw it once right there. Now again, Vayikahalu haYehudim asher b'Shushan abira. So now it says once again, this time referring to Shushan, the capital, right? Vayikahalu, right? Ushara Yehudim and all the other Jews asher minot hamelech nikahalu, right? A third time, right? They gathered together. Va'amod al nafsham v'noach ma'ovehem, right? The rest of the Jews in those provinces, likewise, again, he uses the word mustard. They gathered
Congregate.
together. They congregated. Exactly. What was the superpower of the Jews? Congregating, right? Kiddush, right? Again, fourth time already, right? Again, they mustered, they got together. So you can see that the Megillah wants me to know that this is what happened, is the Jews got together. So the physical mitzvot of Purim, and this is something that Rabbi Eliezer Melamed really emphasizes in his description of what the mitzvot of Purim are about. The mitzvot of Purim are all about coming together. And he says this specifically on the physical mitzvot of Purim, and he calls them actually the mitzvot of Simcha, the mitzvot of rejoicing. And so let's go through each of them in order. So one of them is well, I'm going to go maybe in a little bit backwards. Let's start with the Purim Su'udah, the Purim feast. Now, the Purim feast is a requirement of the day. Feasting generally is on bread. Now, obviously, there's some people in the world who can't eat bread, but just like okay, tell me, let's make this a little conversational. Where else in Jewish tradition do we have things which we would call a Su'udah? What other kinds of days do you have something, a required meal?
Shabbat.
Shabbat. Okay, good. Sudah Shlishit, right, is a good example. On Shabbat, you need 3 of them. Now, I didn't know this, but I thought it was an interesting point. Rabbi Melamed had heard him say this in a shiur, in a class. He said that on Yom Tov, your meals are supposed to be bigger than your Shabbat meals. That's why you only have 2 of them. Because, God's looking out for your waistline. Right? On Shabbat, you have 3 because you're supposed to, okay, Mayor, good point in the chat, but I'm just going to skip that right now because I'm going to keep it simple. If you remind me at the end, we can get to that. We can get to that point. Okay.
So that mitzvah after wedding.
Okay, but no. So yes, mitzvah for a wedding. And wedding's a good one. Right? There's the concept of sudat mitzvah, but you got to the one that I wanted you to get to, which was Shabbat, right? And what are the ingredients? If I'm asking you for a shopping list for a Shabbat meal, what's on your shopping list for a Shabbat meal? You're in the Galapagos Islands for Shabbos, right? What do you have to bring with you so you can make sure you can make Shabbos in the Galapagos?
Bread.
Turtle
Bread.
soup.
Wine.
Okay, Sam, I'm going to kick you off. You can't talk about turtle soup and then I mentioned the Galapagos Islands. That's
It'll
totally
be a pleasure to be kicked.
Okay. So, all right. Anita, thank you. You said challah, right? What else do I need to bring?
Candlesticks.
Candlesticks. Okay, good. So the challah, wine, candlesticks. All right. So I was referring to the food items. The candlesticks we'll put on the side, and not that you don't need the candlesticks, but for Purim, we're just talking about the food items. So what are the bottom line ingredients for a Sudah? You need to have bread. You need to have wine. Now, again, each one of those things is a little bit discretionary. We're going to get into each part of that. But the bread is really the anchor. Most people say you should have meat. And chicken counts as meat in this, because that's sort of what makes something a more enjoyable meal. So now we know that we're going to need to have this meal. The idea of meals in Judaism is it's a social enterprise. Meals are shared with people. The way you create memories, the way that you create bonds, is who you eat with. And in Jewish tradition, it's also who you don't eat with, right? Because that's why we have kosher food, because you want Jews to eat with Jews. And, I was just talking to a travel agent today. I'm trying to put together or at least rough out a trip. I'd love to take a synagogue trip to Emilia Romagna, to some of the cities that people haven't been to in Italy, which have tremendous Jewish history. Modena, Mantua, Padua, Ferrara, that sort of area, Bologna. And he said to me, we were talking about food, and he said to me, there are 3 pigs for every person in this region of Italy. Right? So, Jews are not, we're going to eat different, right? So that's, we make connection over food and our unique dietary needs. Okay, yafeh. Now, if a boost to this is if food makes people feel together, you know what else makes people feel together? Bottle of
Wine.
Yeah. Singing too, but again, our discussion here is the menu, right? So discussion here is the menu. Halacha talks about the menu, does not talk about the songs as a requirement. And there's drinking. So I'm gonna have a few minutes on drinking here so that people understand what I think this is about. Now, first of all, my son told me to read this book called Drunk. This book is trying to figure out why it deals with the sort of the health issues of, is alcohol good for you, is it bad for you, and some of the debates around that. But it also said there's no peace treaty that was ever signed in the last 500 years that was signed without alcohol. And that every culture, if they don't have alcohol, they have some other kind of mind-altering substance that they use when they get together. Now, this is, in his thesis, and I think there's some truth to his thesis. I'm not sure I take everything of it, but his thesis is we people, we are too in our heads. We have trouble disarming. We have trouble relaxing. We have trouble letting people in and letting our guard down. And so, a little bit of wine, helps people feel camaraderie. A little bit of wine helps people get along a little bit better, right? Open up a little
ready.
bit. No, everything, it is the
readiness.
It is the motor oil of the engine of human connectivity, the social lubricant, right? So that's what it is. So if the whole idea of Purim was again this sense of feeling together as a community, so we want you to feel that bond. So that's now here. This is an important aspect of the Purim halachic discussion. The Talmud does say, and I'm sure many people are aware of this, that the Talmud says that one should drink on Purim until one does not know the difference between cursed be Haman, blessed is Mordechai. It's very drunk, if you ask me. Right? So that's a decent amount of being drunk. The Talmud, so many people, and you can't leave once I start this conversation, you cannot leave until I come to the conclusion. Many people think that that's really what you have to do. You have to drink so much that you really, you are fully impaired. Now, I subscribe to a slightly different halachic position. My advice would be to follow this one. I'll give you some of the intermediate positions afterwards. But first, I'll start with how this works out. So you have this section of Talmud. It says you have to get drunk until you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. The Talmud then tells a story. The story goes like this. There were two rabbis, Rava and Rabbi Zera. Rava invites Rabbi Zera to his home for Purim Su'udah, and they drink. And they get so drunk that Rava performs ritual slaughter on Rabbi Zera. It didn't happen in my Su'udah, it happened in theirs. What? And of course, Rava was a great rabbi, and let's say, for argument's sake, he knows the secrets of the Sefer HaYetzirah, the book of creation, and he uses the secrets of the book of creation, the Sefer HaYetzirah, to bring Rabbi Zera back to life. And everything seems to return to normal. And the next year, according to this Talmudic narrative, Rava invites Rabbi Zera to his Purim Suda. Rabbi Zera says, Lo b'chol shata u'shata mitrachish nisa. We cannot expect at every moment a miracle will happen. In other words, no thank you, I'm going to my mother-in-law's, right? Because he said his answer is I can't rely on this. I'm not going to put myself in that kind of danger. So here, one of the medieval authorities, a rabbi from the Provençal tradition, Rabbeinu Ephraim, says this if you know how Talmudic discussion works, Talmudic discussion puts out an interpretation and then it's challenged. And what the story does is the story challenges the statement. The statement was you should get so drunk on Purim that you don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. And the story challenges says, no, you shouldn't. And so Rabbeinu Ephraim says, that's where the Gemara ends. The Gemara ends by saying, we don't rely on miracles. Don't get so drunk that you need to rely on a miracle. That's not how it goes. Enjoy your Purim Suda. So my recommendation, my halachic recommendation is you should drink enough to be happy. I would say 2 glasses of wine. Maybe if you have a designated driver, 3, I don't know. Everybody's different. Their alcohol, their liver capacity, all sorts of things are different. But you be happy. Now, Rabbi Malaman has an interesting statement. He says, different people need different amounts of alcohol to be happy. But I would still say that even those of us who are the most sour and difficult of people should not be drinking so much that they are putting themselves in danger. Rabbi Malamed also says something else interesting, which is if you get so drunk that you are exempt from the mitzvot, then how does this work anyway? If you're doing it for the mitzvah, so that there are other opinions. There's certainly people who are more stringent than me, but I feel like in our day and age where abuse is something which is not uncommon, and accidents happen, and insults happen, and bad behavior happens, and even in the most, I should say, more innocently, people vomit. Vomiting is your body saying, you are poisoning me. I need to save you from your own your own actions. So I think all of that, I wouldn't get anywhere close to any of that. And I think that the drinking on Purim should be what I would call social drinking. And if you want to fit it into the words of the Talmud, so Maimonides has a very interesting way of doing that. He says, look, you should drink enough so you feel like you need to go to sleep, and it's all good. Now, so that's drinking on Purim. And so again, I want to come back to where it starts. It's about feeling together, right? And I want people to be able to feel like they can feel together. That's what the drinking is. When people feel, when you get so drunk that you're completely, you're so impaired that you can't really behave properly. I'll tell you this. I don't want to be around those people. I think most people don't want to be around those people. So that, to me, it interferes with the ultimate goal. Okay, now let's deal with something special this year. This year is a unique year. What makes this year a unique year in terms of your Purim Seudah?
It's on Friday.
Eddie, gold star. You're getting all the points today.
Well,
Any for anyone else, but it's okay. It's a chocolate Purim. No, every year is a chocolate Purim. Sorry, as far as I'm concerned. But this year it's a Purim on a Friday. So Purim on a Friday presents certain challenges. Normally, Purim's one of the most intense days of the year because you have a lot of mitzvot on Purim. You've got to do your Suda, you've got to do your gifts to your poor, you got to do a lot of things. And so usually you save the Purim Suda for later in the day. You maybe start at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, depending on when the sun goes down, but you have a later Suda, maybe 4 o'clock. And now the problem is when you can't really have a big meal on 4 o'clock on a Friday because you're supposed to remain hungry for your Shabbat meal. So if you were to eat your meal, you would spoil your appetite for your Shabbat meal. So what are you supposed to do? So simple. What's a simple answer?
You move it forward or backwards as needed.
That's right. Salami and eggs for breakfast on a baguette. Sounds like a good seuda, right? So that's the simple way to do it. Many people take that. That is certainly rabbinically, that is certainly the straightest and narrowest way to go. Do an early morning seuda with your salami or whichever meat is your preferred way to eat. Okay, that is one way to do Purim Suda. number two, and this is the way we're going to do it here. There's an old custom that I think it dates back as a Jerusalem custom. If you read the Talmud in Psachim, I know you're like, Rabbi, this is a discussion about Purim. Don't take me to Passover. I'm not taking you to Passover. This is still Purim discussion. But the discussion of this particular issue appears in Masechet Psachim. That there were a bunch of rabbis who were eating a meal late in the day on Erev Shabbat, and they did something remarkable. They were pores mapa umevarech. They covered the bread in the middle of the meal. They made kiddush, and like that, their late afternoon meal became a Shabbat feast. So you're allowed to do that also for Purim. You start, I think we're going to start ours at 5:30. At 5:30, we're going to have a Purim meal. You can have your bread, you can have your wine, you can do whatever you want. And then at 6:30, so I'm going to tell everybody, cover all the bread. And we're going to make kiddush, and then that's going to turn into a Shabbat meal. And we will do Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv afterwards as part of that. So that's a unique sort of a thing that we can do for Purim. Some people don't like it because it's not really the most traditional thing to do, but I think for us, one of the things that it will allow for is we'll have a large crowd for this meal. And I think that's a very good and beautiful thing to have on Purim. So that's how you satisfy your Purim Suda. Now, like I said, the miracle of Purim, the Jewish superpower was congregate. So before there was Facebook, how did you keep people at a distance close? You sent them mishloach manot. You send the Su'udah at a distance. Somebody lives in Burnaby, right? They're going to be in Vancouver for Shabbat. But you want them to feel also cared for and loved and part of the community. So how do you have when I was a kid, the telephone company used to have this jingle, reach out and touch someone, right? Reach out and show you care. That's Mishloach Manot. Should be the jingle for Mishloach Manot. Reach out and touch someone, reach out and show you care. You send them 2 items of food. Now, the definition of Mishloach Manot is 2 different kinds of food. Now, when I was growing up, our teachers always taught us there should be 2 different brachot. One, one piece of cake and one, I don't know, candy bar, right? Those are a mizonot and a shakel. But I've never found that written in the books, and so I will say that that's not necessary. There's supposed to be 2 foods, and there's supposed to be 2 foods that could, in theory, independently be put in front of a guest. And so, it could be, and they have to be able to be eaten immediately. So don't send a raw chicken. There's supposed to be things that they could serve at their meal. So that's a simple way to do it is, like, let's just say you made a baguette and a challah. That actually works because the baguette and the challah are 2 different kinds of breads. They're clearly 2 different kinds of things. If you wanted to make a coffee cake and a brownie, also works. 2 clearly different kinds of cakes, certainly fine, right? So as long as these things are distinct, you can do that. And again, the idea behind it is you want to make that sense of, you want to create that sense of community. Okay, now we've now done, not this week, but last week we did the reading of the Purim Megillah. And then this week we did the Su'udah, the Purim feast. And then we had Mishloach Manot, which was reaching out and giving 2 foods. And that is minimally to one other person. Minimally to one other person, but you can Obviously, I think generally it's hard to limit it to one other person. But like if you're a family of three, you want to make sure that, the dad, the mom, child, each gives to one person. They have one that's just theirs. They can choose who to give it to. Okay. So now we're up to the last and in certain ways the most important of the three mitzvot. And that is matanot levyonim, the gifts to the poor. Now, the gifts to the poor is interesting because Maimonides says that you are meant to spend more resources on the gifts to the poor than on your other mitzvot of Purim. And I would have thought it would have been a plea for equity, right? Poor people should be able to enjoy Purim as well. Just because you can afford a chicken doesn't mean that they can't. Why shouldn't they have chicken for the holiday? Why should they be stuck, making wacky mac? They should also have chicken. So that would have been a very good argument. Everyone would have said, Rambam, it's great. But that's not what Rambam says. Rambam says something different. He says, Ki ein simcha gedola u'meforah milismoach lev hanim. There is no greater and more splendorous mitzvah, joy, than to give to the poor. Maimonides' argument is an argument out of joy, it's an emotional argument, not the emotional what's good for the poor person. Ironically, it is a self-serving reason to give to the poor, because Purim you're supposed to be joyous, and how do you? If once you get over yourself, you're going to really be joyous by making somebody else feel glad. And maybe that's part of the whole Purim thing, is that we are very social creatures. We're built to be social creatures. We're built to react to being able to do kindness to another person, and that is something which actually makes us feel happy. Now, there's a very interesting distinction in the Rambam, and here I'm going to jump out of the laws of Purim for just a minute and go into the laws of Yom Tov, and then we'll get back to Purim. Rambam says that there's a mitzvah to be happy on Yom Tov, and generally the way that mitzvah is accomplished is through meat, wine, maybe on Yom Tov it's for clothing. But the Maimonides says anybody who locks the doors of his house and does not bring in the poor or others into his home to feed them on Yom Tov, ein zu simchat Yom Tov. This is not what we call joy of Yom Tov. That is simchat kreso. That is the joy of the belly. And so I would use two different English words to distinguish between two different kinds of things. There is pleasure and happiness. Now, we often think that pleasure brings us happiness, but not in halachic terms. Halachic terms, happiness comes from a sense of higher fulfillment, fulfilling your mission, fulfilling a social good. And so the only way to do that is to take care of other people. So that's what Rambam's saying. Rambam's saying is, now we're back in Purim. You want to do joy, pleasure you can do on Purim. But simcha, that's a whole different story. So simcha, that you need to be taking care of someone else in order to be engaged in simcha. And so you should spend more money on that than you do on your other mitzvot. The rabbis spend a lot of time talking about the technical qualities of this particular halacha, and the technical qualities are as such. You're supposed to provide a meal for a minimum of 2 poor people. Now, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. What does a meal, if you're going to Nava to get something that you would minimally call lunch, how much would that cost? What are you going to buy now for $5?
Like, I don't know, $20.
One slice of pizza? So, okay, let's say you were feeding a boy.
Yeah.
$10.
$12. Okay. And okay, 12, and gets you the drink too?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I throw the drink in. All right. How much do you have? 17. All right. So 18. All right. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna $36, maybe to be safe, we'll say $40, somewhere around $36. So you want per person, you want to be trying to give, I don't know, let's say you want to be able to cover 2 meals. So you're talking about maybe somewhere between $60 to $80 per person is your matanat levyonim obligation.
Wow,
Now,
that's a lot for one meal.
it's for two people,
Oh, so two people, okay.
right? So your total is let's say two people at $30 is $60.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, here's where this gets I'm no longer talking halacha. Well, I will keep talking halacha, but I'm going to give you good advice. If you do this through the Sharat Tzedek before Purim, in other words, you go on the website and you select Rabbi's Discretionary Fund Purim Gifts to the Poor, and you pay your $60, you'll get a tax receipt for $60. And ultimately, the government of Canada will support you according to your marginal tax rate, right? So you can
And it
do
makes
that.
me happy.
There you go. And it makes you happy, Sam.
And then
So,
you'll prepare the mashloach manot levyonim.
no, okay, not misloch manot. This is matanot levanim. Just to also everybody knows, this is how we work here in Sharat Tzedek with matanot levanim. There are some in our community that we are supporting and we're helping out, and we will continue to do that. We also, this is like I'm like Berkshire Hathaway, or the
Buffett.
Royal Bank of Canada. I'm like a mutual fund. I'm a diversified investment. So I will diversify amongst poor here in Canada, in Vancouver in particular. I will also, there are 3 different Israeli charities that we distribute to. One is called Od Yosef Chai, which we've been using for 22 years. I've used them for more than that. They distribute in Israel on Purim. The second organization is called Leket Israel, which is Israel's largest food bank supplier. And they also have a campaign for Matanat Levanim. And then this year we have added we are also distributing to some widows who have lost their husbands in combat in Gaza. And so or maybe in the north, I don't know. I'm agnostic to exactly how their husbands fell, but we chose to include them in this in our distribution amongst the other Purim distributions. This is I would just say should Revenue Canada be listening to this? This is very much a solid mandate of the Sharat Tzedek. Not only to do Purim gifts to the poor, but if you read this past week's Parshat Mishpatim, it tells you that you have a special obligation to take care of orphans and widows, right? So going back to the very first moments at the foot of Sinai, we were instructed to make orphans and widows a priority in our tzedakah. So we're fulfilling that as well. So this is part of that process. Just some interesting things about the Matanat Levyonim. So as hopefully people know, you're supposed to separate 10% of your income out and give it to charity, right? So 10% post-tax income off to the side to charity. The money for Matanat Levyonim cannot come from those funds. It has to be separate funds. Because in principle, those funds don't belong to you. Those funds belong to charity. So it's kind of like funding the poor on money that's already, in a sense, theirs. Now, it may not belong to this particular poor person, but in a sense, you're using money that's not really yours. You're meant to use your own money for Matanat Levanim. If you want to say, okay, I was going to give, $100 to cover my Matanat Levanim, but when the rabbi said we're taking care of widows and orphans, I realized I need to use more. So then you can say, okay, I'm going to take $100 out of my maaser money and I'm going to give more to this. That's kosher because you've covered your minimum. As long as you've covered your minimum, you're okay. Then you can add more from your maaser money. Okay, that's now here's another interesting thing. Okay, I'll pose this as a question. Right, you need to give it to 2 different poor people. So, Chaim and Leah Cohen are their house burned down in Los Angeles, Rahman al God forbid, and they are destitute right now. They're very poor. They can use every dollar they can. He lost his job. She lost her job. They're just basically as poor can be. Now, I want to give them my money for Matanot Levanim, for gifts to the poor, but they're married. Does that count as two people or one people? One.
Two.
Two.
Okay. So
I got a feeling it would count as one.
it follows the same rules as the HOV lane. Every heartbeat counts as another person, even if it's in the same family.
Mhm.
Right?
Two
So,
individuals. Yeah.
right. Like I said, it follows the rules of the HOV lane. I would have also said that maybe, if I had thought to myself, it doesn't count because it's one family, it's one address, but as it is a totally kosher to do this in this way. It is also best to try and do it anonymously. There's also another interesting law with respect to Matanot Evanim. We don't feel it so much here in Vancouver, but if you were in Jerusalem, you would feel it much more intensely. And that is, you are not allowed to say no to someone who extends their hand and asks for a donation on Purim. Now, here, in Jerusalem, you need a slightly different strategy because I said, you're supposed to pay for a meal. We said we settled on maybe $17 for our lunch here, right? So everybody who comes up to you, let's say you want to go to the Kotel, maybe you want to walk, down a certain street in Yerushalayim, you could meet 20 people, right? So that's $340, right? That's a lot of money. Maybe maybe you weren't planning to spend that. So there, you don't have to give everybody. You can
I'll
have
call you back in 15 minutes, okay, Harvey? I'll call you back.
So in that case, you can give your matanot levyonim money to each person as they come, but it's the amount that you distribute is that it should be your output needs to be equivalent to the meals. But you don't have to give every person that amount. So, okay, maybe I'll leave a couple minutes for questions about any of these.
Rabbi, where did you say it's on the Sharei Tzedek website, special for Purim? It doesn't seem to be.
Hold on. Okay, I'm just making sure it's there. It may not be there yet. So, I did, but I don't even see it. Oh, here, Rabbi's Discretionary Fund.
So
I'm just go right now. I'm trying to just go in the Rabbi's Discretionary Fund. This is good. We're like beta testing here.
Yesharat Tzedek doing this year Purim in a box.
Hold on a second. If I'm gonna go box. Okay. Well, see, it's perfect. I don't think we've sent out the Matanot Levyonim letter yet. So this is perfect. I'm glad that I now have I have this. We beta tested it live, and I will make sure this gets up tomorrow.
Thanks.
So I've got a question on the
Sure.
getting drunk thing.
Oh, okay.
Is it? I mean, the most basic interpretation is like you can't even tell the difference between the face of the two people, but could it also be interpreted as like introducing moral ambiguity? You don't really know who's bad and who's good. And that goes back to the idea of like people social lubricants, or that even people in your circle that you might have had conflict with, you're able to kind of
I see. Okay. Very interesting. Okay. And now I'm understanding you. So you're saying that, okay, it levels all it's sort of all people. Yes. So I think that there's some discussion of that kind of thing is that yes, you stop your level of differentiation between people is minimized. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
I'm just curious what other.
No, I think
what
that's
does that actually mean? Not to.
so some people want to make it very technical and they say, like, if you if you drink a little bit more than usual, you'll sort of lose a little bit of dexterity and then you're gonna like you'll say some things and if you say curse Haman, blessed is Mordechai enough times, you'll make a mistake once and it's good enough. That's like a very technical answer. I think, I think I saw something similar to what you said, and it's more or less, it's sort of like it makes you less picky. It makes you less irritable to other people. I mean, obviously, everybody has a different reaction to being drunk. Um, so it's there are interpretations out there which are sort of they basically say that um, the it says that they saved all of the Jews, and so this level of drunkenness is sort of a recognition that with two different ways of looking at that. One is saying it's a physical thing. It's just my body. It's my physical essence. So I want to obliterate my mind to be able to celebrate my physical essence. I never found that one terribly convincing. Another version of it is closer to what you said, which is if it's every Jew, then I want to stop having moral judgments about different Jews. Anybody who comes in to my party who's Jewish, uh, you know, I'm celebrating all Jews without any differentiation. So I think that's fairly close to the way you articulate it. Um, so Tiana says it is true that one cannot deny charity when someone asks them directly, all of the time, not just on Purim. Well, yes and no. On all of the time, if somebody says to you, "Give me charity, I have no clothes," then you're allowed to be cynical and establish the veracity of that statement. You can question them on that. You can call it. You can say, "Wait a minute, I don't think that's true." If they say they're hungry, you have to feed them. But on Purim, and in Purim, anybody who asks, even can't even question their Jewishness. Just give. Annie, you have your hand up.
Yes, may I make a comment not on food and mishloach and matanot levunim, but rather with the idea of v'yakel, the gathering together.
Yes.
It came to my mind that when Haman says to the king, "Yeshno am echad mefuzar umeforad," it spread out and disunited, separated.
Correct.
And
Correct.
coming
Correct.
together as the kahal, it's to rectify this thing of the nation of Israel being separated rather than united. I
Okay.
thought that was a
Yes.
great
Yes.
contrast.
Correct. Good point. So I would say it like this: is we exposed our vulnerability by being am mefuzar mufurad ben amin. We were different and separated amongst all the people, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't want to be the Jews
then
who
we can
support BB versus the Jews who don't support BB. The Jews of the Jews who want the hostages freed versus the Jews who want to defeat Hamas. Right? That's a debate we have, but that's not an identity that separates us. Right? We want unity. And unity sometimes means being able to sit next to somebody whose cologne you don't like. And
Yes, absolutely.
perhaps even more. If
So
you
you
have a medical condition and alcohol, no, don't drink at all. Find another way to be happy. Okay? Do not drink. If you have a medical condition, do not drink. Okay, I'm just making sure. All of these mitzvot are done on Purim day. What about Matanot Levanim? So Matanot Levanim have to be distributed on Purim day. But when you put the money into our account ahead of time, you're simply making me an agent. I'm the one who stresses about getting it all done on Purim day. It makes my life immeasurably easier if you do it beforehand. And I just letting you know. See what happens. This is how my Purim looks. We finish Megillah reading, and I go up to Anna and I say, "Okay, Anna, can you ask the computer how much money has come in from Matanot Levanim?" Then I have a spreadsheet. My spreadsheet it works on a percentage basis. Chaim Cohen gets this. Chevy Goldberg gets that. Sally Levitt gets this. All these names are fictitious, just so you know. And then, and they're broken up as percentages. And then my Excel sheet, basically, I take the total in. The most annoying thing is I have to count the cash. And the worst of all, is you people who give me American dollars. I mean, I love American dollars, don't get me wrong. But how am I supposed to calculate them in this whole thing, right? So, it used to be worse. There used to be these guys who came up from yeshiva, and I guess their mothers would give them, for some reason, they would give them these big envelopes of American dollars, and they would they put them into the tzedakah boxes. It's not such a problem anymore. Most of us have Canadian dollars. All right, very good. I'm not here next week. I will be in Florida at a conference for rabbis, and so we're taking a week off, but we will be the week after. We will be on, and then believe it or not, we will be deep into Pesach and all the Pesach related things. If you have specific issues you want me to cover vis-a-vis Pesach, kosher in the kitchen, how to do a good Seder, anything at all Pesach related, happy to cover that. Okay. All right.